Hello everyone, QuickFlix is with you, and the 5th episode of the Amazing Digital Circus came out, which largely reveals to us not only the past of the main characters, but finally explains how and why they all got here.
Sometimes got bored of things, and I would seek out mild thrills, like exploring abandoned buildings,
I sometimes did that. I wouldn't record it, though.
Each of them, being dissatisfied with his real life, stumbled upon an abandoned office and launched the game about the circus on an old computer, which we have already seen, exactly as I predicted in my very first video on this animated series. And they were bullied or not taken seriously, hated or despised. None of them could find a place anywhere. And, being hickey freaks, in the dark corners of the internet, they learned about the game that can deprive you of past memories and give you a new life in a magical world full of nostalgia and adventure. And when they heard about it, each of them in turn found an abandoned office to make VR glasses, forgetting everything that was, and voluntarily found himself in an amazing digital circus. Yes, even if you remember that you came across an abandoned office by accident, they found out about it through the darknet. But some of the guys may even have deliberately searched for this place after learning about it on the internet. After all, it would be too surprising a coincidence to accidentally go into one abandon and run the game for such a number of people, taking into account Kofma and the rest of the scattered ones. One thing is clear, they all had a very sweet life, and as a result, each of them suffers from a certain psychological illness. Gengo, as we've already found out in the 4th episode, worked as a manager in a diner where all the staff hated her and her dreams were not destined to come true due to constant congestion at work. Therefore, she is in an eternal depression from which she simply cannot get out. Rogata, as we remember, was an ordinary accountant, and she just got bored with the routine. She, of course, was looking for thrills, but everything that happens in the circus interrupts her past quiet everyday life with rare light wakedones too much. Zubo has been unable to find herself and self-identify all her life, and clearly suffers from gender dysphoria, which was hinted at in the 3rd episode. Although the king is already in the game, he has lost his wife, and it is unknown how long he's been suffering from schizophrenia. And Horned and Jax are a whole separate story on which we will have to dwell in more detail.
Do you have any actual friends?
Not anymore. Wait, no. I'm sorry. I wasn't talking about that.
It is clearly hinted to us that Jax once had a best friend who is no longer with him. And this episode gives us hints of 2 contenders for this role at once. Either it is the horned cat itself or the frog near the door of which Jax stopped during the intermission. Or, as I believe, both of them were once his friends and perhaps even something more. The psychological problems of Horned and Jax were the most obvious since the pilot of the animated series. She always tries to be perfect, to keep the bar, turning a blind eye to any problems. And he is a downtrodden boy who has finally been given the will to come off. But perfectionism and withdrawal are 2 possible alternative consequences of strict upbringing.
I certainly don't miss the yelling, the braiding, and guilt-tripping.
And most likely, we're talking about their common mother. Jax and Ragata are brother and sister. That is why they react so vividly to each other's statements throughout the 5th episode.
Yeah, just kind of a farm girl. Nothing too out of the ordinary.
That is why such a restrained in emotions Rogata so vividly splashes them out over and over again on Jax, trying to convey to his younger brother that it is impossible to behave like this. If this seems unrealistic to you, remember that the king got into the game with his wife, so these 2 could also have entered the circus together. And what kind of coincidence is that? Rogata grew up on a farm, and Jax is afraid of corn that grows there. Most likely some unpleasant incident from childhood is connected with this fear. Either a strict mother beat corn on the screen of a violent Jax for bad behavior, or forced to eat a dozen cucumbers as punishment for another offense. One thing is clear, both Rogata and Jax were kept in a tight grip, forcing her to strictly follow the will of her parents and did not give her the right to make a mistake. As a result, Rogata became too submissive, began to reproach herself for any imperfection, like not even getting knocked out in softball, and always smiles, even despite the extremely unpleasant situation.
Remember when Kaufmo smashed me against the walls and I got all jumbled up?
Jax, who grew up with her in the same house, does not understand her behavior.
I don't know. I think she tries way too hard. Like, we're stuck in... Why are you always pretending everything's always fine?
He sees the situation differently. Let them be locked up in this game. They have finally found freedom about the tyranny of their mother, and now they can do whatever they want. That is why he is having fun with might and main, taking it out on others in parallel for the years of discomfort received from his mother and extremely likely bullying at school.
Yeah, there's nothing more fun than being back in school.
Well, on the contrary, Rogata cannot get out of the framework set by her mother, and that's why Jax's behavior pisses her off.
And then you just act like you never do anything wrong and everybody loves you, when in reality you just fuck everything up for everyone else!
They have something to say to each other just because of the huge layer of the joint past. However, neither one nor the other is a good groom. They are both extremes of the consequences of excessive control. They both still have to work on themselves to become better.
I'm sorry, Jax, for bringing up that thing earlier.
But what kind of friend are we talking about if Rogata was his sister? I assume that in a thirst to escape from the all-controlling mother, Jax offered to slingshot and go to the Amazing Digital Circus in order to start a new life here. And here the rabbit still managed to find a friend, the same frog, near the door of which, as if bored, Jax stopped during the intermission and then, going into the bar, immediately asked for a drink. Most likely it was in the circus that Jax finally found a real friend for the first time in his entire life, with whom they mocked others together and spoiled their lives while the horn remained on its own. Even now, we see how she envies the relationship of the rabbit, remember, because she never managed to find a real girlfriend. In fact, Jax was the closest person to her, but spending time with the frog, the rabbit pulled away from her sister, and loneliness could not but hit her.
The first steps of a budding friendship, right, Ragata?
However, the frog is no longer in the circus. Most likely, it has dissipated. And considering Jax's anger during a conversation about a friend and guilt, Rogata has tears in her eyes. It is she who is to blame for its dispersion. Or, at least, that's what Jax thinks, which is what he hinted at during the conversation in the bar.
Oh, remember when you got high at McDonald's and told Gangle to kill herself?
Ganga didn't say anything like that at the horn, but she could have done it to a hooligan frog in a fit of anger. And judging by the posters at the stadium, Save is not the first diner in which the main characters managed to work. Jax was clearly an unwanted loser at school, and Horned, based on her perfectionism and submissiveness, was most likely an excellent student. And as if the first one entering the game had nothing to lose, and the second one did not manage to gain anything here, although he hardly wants to return to his past life, like Jackson. The frog clearly had a destructive effect on the rabbit, but perhaps communicating with Remember, he will be able to become the best version of himself, like a sponge, absorbing her best qualities. But considering that a complete loss of sanity comes to the beauty due to the aggravation of the psychological problems of the players, the condition of the hornet shown at the end of the episode hints at its possible dispersion in subsequent episodes of the circus, and the main characters will need to prevent it. First of all, to openly communicate with the horny Jax, discussing past grievances, and finally establishing his brother-sisterly relationship. It's hard to say what the mannequin is hinting at, peeping at the main characters during the episode. There are no arguments for bold conclusions yet, and it's not interesting to point a finger at the sky. However, in this episode, we were finally confirmed that Kane can still influence the mind of players, as I have said several times in my previous videos.
Hold the egg white, since I'm a vegan. What? I hate this! How is this even possible? I thought Kane couldn't...
Kane was lying when he said he wasn't capable of it, and that changes a lot. And that's all for today. please like the video to help promote it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss future reviews.
And Quick Flicks was with you. Thanks for watching, and bye.